The first thing Tessa Norton noticed when she walked into her late aunt's flower shop was the smell, not the heady perfume of roses or the crisp scent of freshly cut stems, but the musty odor of neglect. Dust motes danced in the pale morning light streaming through the clouded windows, illuminating empty display shelves and withered arrangements that should have been discarded weeks ago. Bloom and Blossom, once the pride of Meadowbrook's Main Street, had faded along with her Aunt Eleanor in her final months. Well, Tessa sighed, setting down her suitcase. This is home now, 27 years old and starting over. Again. The letter from her aunt's attorney had arrived 3 weeks ago, just as she'd been laid off from her graphic design position at a struggling marketing firm in Chicago. Inheriting a flower shop in a small town she hadn't visited since childhood seemed like fate's strange way of offering a lifeline. Tessa ran her finger along a countertop, leaving a clean streak in the dust. Her aunt had been her only real family after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. She'd spent summers here until college pulled her away, and then career ambitions kept her in the city. Now she felt the weight of guilt for not visiting more in those final years. The bell above the door jingled, startling her. A tall man with broad shoulders filled the doorframe, his dark hair slightly tousled by the spring breeze. "Sorry, we're closed," Tessa called out automatically. "I know," the man replied, his deep voice resonating through the empty shop. "I'm here about the rent." Tessa straightened her posture, suddenly aware of her travel-worn appearance. "You must be the landlord. I'm Tessa Norton, Eleanor's niece. I just arrived." His expression softened slightly. "Flynn Parker, I'm sorry about your aunt. She was a wonderful woman." Flynn Parker. The name didn't ring any bells, though Aunt Eleanor had mentioned her landlord a few times in their phone conversations, always with a mixture of exasperation and fondness. He didn't look like what Tessa had imagined. She'd pictured someone older, perhaps with a paunch and thinning hair. This man was probably in his early 30s, with striking blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Thank you," Tessa said, walking toward him. I know she had fallen behind on some payments. I'm planning to get things in order as soon as possible. Flynn waved his hand dismissively. "That's not why I'm here. I actually came to see if you needed anything. Eleanor mentioned you might be taking over the shop." That was the plan, but... Tessa gestured around the neglected space. "I'm not sure what I've gotten myself into." Flynn's eyes followed her gesture, taking in the state of the shop with a frown. "It wasn't always like this. This place used to be the heart of Main Street." "I remember," Tessa said softly. "I spent summers arranging flowers with my aunt when I was a kid." Something in Flynn's expression shifted, a flash of recognition. "You're that Tessa, the one who made those little paper flower cards that Eleanor kept by the register." Tessa felt her cheeks warm. "You remember those?" "Eleanor showed them to everyone who came in," Flynn said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "She was incredibly proud of you." An unexpected lump formed in Tessa's throat. She turned away, pretending to examine a dried arrangement. "I haven't made one of those in years." "Well," Flynn said after a moment, "I should let you get settled, but my offer stands if you need anything. I'm just a call away. My office is actually right upstairs." Tessa nodded, grateful for the gesture. "Thank you, I might take you up on that once I figure out where to start." As he turned to leave, Flynn paused at the door. "By the way, there's a business owners meeting tomorrow at the community center. 7 o'clock might be a good way to introduce yourself to everyone." After he left, Tessa stood in the middle of the shop, feeling both overwhelmed and strangely determined. She hadn't planned on staying in Meadowbrook permanently. The idea had been to fix up the shop, sell it, and return to Chicago with some much-needed capital to restart her life. But standing there, surrounded by the ghosts of arrangements past and childhood memories, something stirred inside her. This place had been her aunt's passion, her legacy. Could Tessa really just sell it off to the highest bidder? The following morning, Tessa woke early, determined to at least assess what she was dealing with. The apartment above the shop now, hers, was small but charming, with exposed brick walls and windows that overlooked the town square. Her aunt had decorated it with vintage botanical prints and shelves overflowing with gardening books. After a quick breakfast, Tessa headed downstairs, armed with cleaning supplies and a portable speaker. If she was going to tackle this mess, she needed music. As she scrubbed and swept, memories of summers spent in the shop flooded back, learning how to trim stems at the perfect angle, the secret to making roses last longer, how to comfort someone buying funeral arrangements. By midday, she had cleared out the dead inventory and cleaned most of the display cases. The shop was starting to look less abandoned, though still a far cry from what it once was. Tessa was contemplating the state of the ancient cash register when the bell jingled again. Flynn stood in the doorway holding 2 paper bags. "I thought you might need lunch." "That's—" Tessa was momentarily speechless. "That's very kind of you," he shrugged, setting the bags on the newly cleaned counter. Eleanor used to forget to eat when she was working. "I figured it might run in the family." Tessa smiled, realizing she was indeed hungry. "Guilty as charged, thank you." They sat on stools behind the counter, unwrapping sandwiches from the local deli. Tessa couldn't help noticing that Flynn seemed perfectly at ease in the shop, knowing where to find napkins and even locating 2 relatively clean glasses for water. "So, what's your plan for Bloom and Blossom?" Flynn asked between bites. Tessa hesitated. "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. I was a graphic designer in Chicago until recently. I know flowers from helping my aunt, but running a business is a whole different thing." "The flower business has changed a lot since Eleanor started," Flynn admitted, "but there's still demand. People order flowers for weddings, funerals, anniversaries, apologies, all the big moments. The problem is getting them to order from here instead of online or the supermarket," Tessa pointed out. Flynn nodded. "True, but you have something they don't, a dusty shop and outdated equipment." He laughed, a rich sound that made Tessa smile despite herself. "You have the personal touch. Eleanor knew everyone in town, what they liked, what they could afford, whose anniversary was coming up. That's worth something." Tessa considered this. Her aunt had indeed had a knack for making every customer feel special. "I'm not her, though." "No," Flynn agreed, "but you're here. That's a start." After lunch, Flynn helped her carry some of the larger broken items to the dumpster behind the shop. Tessa couldn't help noticing that he seemed to know the layout of the place intimately, down to which door hinges stuck and which floorboards creaked. "How long have you owned this building?" she asked as they headed back inside. "About 5 years," he replied. "I bought it when I moved back to town after college." "And what do you do besides collect rent from struggling florists?" Tessa meant it as a joke, but immediately worried it sounded rude. Flynn just smiled, though. "I run Parker Investments. We're based upstairs, though most of our work is done remotely now." "Parker Investments," Tessa repeated, the name vaguely familiar. "Wait, are you related to the Parkers who funded the new library wing?" "That would be my parents," Flynn said with a slight grimace. "They're big on community investment. And you're not." Flynn seemed to consider the question carefully. "I believe in investing where it matters. Sometimes that's a library wing, sometimes it's—" He trailed off, looking around the flower shop. "Sometimes it's giving a tenant a break on rent." Tessa guessed. "Your aunt was special," he said simply. That evening, Tessa attended the business owners' meeting at the community center. She recognized a few faces from her childhood, though many were new to her. Everyone seemed curious about her plans for Bloom and Blossom, and she found herself making vague promises about revitalization. Flynn arrived late, slipping into the back of the room just as the meeting was ending. He wore a tailored suit now, looking every inch the successful businessman. Several people immediately approached him, and Tessa noticed how they deferred to him despite his relatively young age. "Tessa," a woman with curly gray hair engulfed her in a hug. "I'm Martha from the bakery next door. Your aunt was my dearest friend." "I remember you," Tessa said, genuinely pleased. "You used to sneak me cookies when I helped in the shop," Martha beamed. "That's right. Now, honey, how long are you staying? Is the shop reopening?" "I'm hoping to reopen next week, actually," Tessa found herself saying. "Just for a trial period to see if I can make a go of it." "Wonderful," Martha clapped her hands. "We've missed having a proper florist in town. That chain store by the highway just isn't the same." As the crowd began to disperse, Tessa noticed Flynn watching her from across the room. He nodded slightly before being pulled into another conversation. Tessa felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach and quickly attributed it to nerves about her impulsive announcement. Over the next few days, Tessa threw herself into revitalizing the shop. She cleaned every surface, ordered minimal stock from her aunt's old suppliers, and created a simple but functional website. She also discovered her aunt's customer book, a detailed record of everyone who had ever purchased from Bloom and Blossom, including their preferences and important dates. Flynn stopped by daily, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to check on her progress. She learned that his office was directly above the flower shop, which explained his frequent visits. What she couldn't explain was why the thought of seeing him again each day made her work faster. "You don't have to keep checking on me," she told him on the fourth day as he helped her arrange the new display cooler that had just been delivered. "I'm not going to burn the place down." "Maybe I just enjoy the company," Flynn replied, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to the task at hand. "My work can be isolating. Investment banking doesn't involve a lot of people. It involves the wrong kind of people sometimes," he said with a wry smile. "Numbers people." "Not flower people," Tessa laughed. "And what's the difference? Flower people understand that beauty matters," Flynn said, suddenly serious, "that some things can't be quantified on a spreadsheet." The way he looked at her made Tessa feel exposed, as if he could see past her practical exterior to the artist who still dreamed in colors and shapes. She quickly changed the subject to safer ground the logistics of the grand reopening she had planned for that weekend. The reopening day dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring Saturday. Tessa had sent emails to everyone in her aunt's customer book and placed flyers around town. Martha had promised to send bakery customers her way, and the local newspaper had even run a small piece about Eleanor Norton's niece continuing the family business. Still, as Tessa arranged the fresh inventory and set up the sidewalk display, she felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. What if no one came? What if they came but didn't like her arrangements? What if this whole endeavor was just delaying the inevitable failure? At precisely 9 o'clock, she flipped the sign to open and waited. For 15 excruciating minutes, the shop remained empty. Then the bell jingled and a young couple walked in. "We heard Bloom and Blossom was back," the woman said excitedly. "We're planning our wedding for September, and I've always dreamed of having Eleanor do my flowers." Tessa's heart sank. "I'm so sorry, I'm actually Eleanor's niece. She passed away a few months ago." The couple's faces fell. "Oh, we didn't know. We're sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Tessa said. Then, taking a deep breath, she added, "I'd be honored to do your wedding flowers, though. I trained with my aunt every summer." The couple exchanged uncertain glances. "Could we see some of your work?" Tessa's mind raced. She hadn't prepared a portfolio. "I actually don't have anything to show you right now," but the bell jingled again, and Flynn walked in carrying a large arrangement of wildflowers in a vintage blue vase. "Special delivery," he announced. "Where would you like this, Miss Norton?" Tessa stared at him in confusion before understanding dawned. "Thank you. Perhaps in the front window. It's perfect for showcasing our spring collection." Flynn set the arrangement down with a flourish. It was stunning wildflowers and delicate branches arranged in a seemingly casual but clearly artistic design. The bride-to-be gasped. "That's exactly the look I want, natural but elegant." "Tessa designed it," Flynn said smoothly. "She has a gift for capturing the essence of each season." Tessa shot him a look that she hoped conveyed both gratitude and a promise of retribution for his well-intentioned lie. "This is just a sample. I'd create custom designs based on your wedding colors and theme." By the time the couple left an hour later, Tessa had secured her first wedding contract and was feeling significantly more confident. The shop steadily filled with curious townspeople, old customers, and even a few tourists passing through. "You saved me back there," she whispered to Flynn when they had a moment alone. "But now I actually need to create something that matches what you brought in." Flynn's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I have complete faith in your abilities." But if you want, I can tell you who actually made that arrangement. Please do, so I can beg them to teach me." "Eleanor," Flynn said softly. "She made it for my office last spring. I preserved it because I couldn't bear to throw it away after she got sick." Tessa looked at the arrangement with new eyes, seeing her aunt's distinctive touch in the way the stems were balanced. "You kept it all this time?" Flynn nodded, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I should go. You've got customers waiting." Before Tessa could respond, he was gone, leaving her to wonder about the man who had preserved her aunt's flowers and then used them to help her when she needed it most. The reopening was a success by any measure. By closing time, Tessa had sold most of her inventory, booked 2 weddings and a retirement party, and collected a list of regular customers who wanted weekly arrangements delivered to their homes or businesses. As she locked the front door, exhausted but exhilarated, she noticed a light still on in the office above. Without overthinking it, she walked around to the side entrance and climbed the stairs to Flynn's office. The door was ajar and she could see him sitting at his desk, surrounded by papers and computer screens. He looked up at her knock, surprise evident on his face. "Tessa, everything okay? Everything's great, actually." She stepped into the office, noticing for the first time how impressive it was, tastefully decorated with modern furniture and art, with large windows overlooking the town square. "I wanted to thank you for today and for all your help this week." Flynn leaned back in his chair. "You did all the hard work. I just provided moral support and the occasional sandwich." "And a crucial floral arrangement," Tessa reminded him with a smile. "Seriously, Flynn, I don't think I could have done this without you." Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his confident demeanor. "I'm glad I could help. Eleanor would be proud of you." "I hope so." Tessa hesitated, then decided to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Why did you keep my aunt's arrangement all this time?" Flynn was quiet for a long moment. "Your aunt was more than just a tenant to me. When I moved back to town after my MBA, I was under a lot of pressure from my family to join the main branch of Parker Investments in New York. Eleanor would let me sit in her shop when I needed to think. No pressure, no expectations, just peace and flowers." "That sounds like her," Tessa said, remembering how her aunt had always given her space to create without judgment. "When I decided to stay in Meadowbrook and open a branch office here instead, my parents thought I was throwing away my potential," Flynn continued. "Eleanor was the one who told me I was brave for choosing my own path. That arrangement was a gift to celebrate my first year of profitability." Tessa was touched by the story and surprised by this glimpse into Flynn's life. She had assumed his path had been smooth and privileged. "Thank you for sharing that, and for sharing her arrangement today." "It seemed fitting," Flynn said. Then, with a hint of mischief, "Though now you'll have to actually create something that good for that poor couple's wedding." Tessa groaned. "Don't remind me, I'm already panicking about it." "I have complete faith in you," Flynn said, echoing his words from earlier, but this time there was no teasing in his tone. "Eleanor wouldn't have left you the shop if she didn't believe in your talent." Their eyes met across the desk, and Tessa felt that strange flutter in her stomach again. This time she couldn't blame it on nerves. The following weeks fell into a pleasant rhythm. Tessa would open the shop each morning, often finding coffee waiting for her, courtesy of Flynn. He would stop by during the day, sometimes with lunch, sometimes just to chat between his meetings. In the evenings, she would experiment with new arrangements, occasionally asking for his opinion, which he always gave honestly but kindly. Business was steadily growing. Word had spread about the quality of her work, particularly after she successfully executed the wedding arrangements that had seemed so daunting at first. She had hired a part-time assistant, a local college student named Zoe who was studying botany and had a good eye for color. One afternoon, as Tessa was closing up shop, Flynn appeared with an uncharacteristically serious expression. "You have dinner plans?" he asked. "Just leftover pasta and Netflix," Tessa admitted. "Why? There's something I need to discuss with you, business-related," he added quickly. "Would you join me at Riverside Inn in an hour?" Tessa's heart sank. Riverside Inn was the fanciest restaurant in town, the kind of place where important business discussions happened. Was he finally going to talk about the rent she still hadn't fully caught up on? Of course, she agreed, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll meet you there. An hour later, wearing the only nice dress she had brought from Chicago, Tessa entered the restaurant. Flynn was already seated at a quiet corner table, looking handsome in a dark blue shirt that matched his eyes. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. You look beautiful, he said, his eyes briefly taking in her floral print dress. Thank you, Tessa replied, trying to ignore the warmth his compliment created. So what's this business we need to discuss? Flynn waited until they had ordered and the waiter had left before leaning forward slightly. I received an offer on the building today. Tessa felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. Oh, it's significantly above market value, Flynn continued. The developers want to convert the entire block into upscale condos with retail spaces on the ground floor. I see, Tessa said, her mind racing. She had no lease, only a month-to-month arrangement her aunt had established years ago. When would I need to be out? Flynn looked startled. I'm not asking you to leave, Tessa. But if you're selling the building, I haven't decided to sell, Flynn interrupted. I wanted to talk to you first. Tessa frowned, confused. Why, it's your building, it's a business decision. Flynn ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Tessa had come to recognize as a sign of frustration. It's not just a business decision. This building, your shop, they matter to the community, they matter to me. Flynn, Tessa said gently, you don't need to worry about me. I knew this was probably temporary when I came here. Is that what you want? Flynn asked, his blue eyes intense. For this to be temporary, the question caught her off guard. What did she want? When she'd first arrived in Meadowbrook, her plan had been clear: fix up the shop, sell it, return to Chicago. But now, I don't know, she admitted. I've grown attached to the place, to the customers, too. She trailed off, not ready to say what they both knew was hanging between them. Flynn reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not going to sell the building, Tessa. I never was. I just needed a reason to have this conversation with you. What conversation? Tessa asked, her heart beating faster as his thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. The one where I tell you that I've been half in love with you since you walked into that dusty shop and looked at it like it was a challenge instead of a burden, Flynn said, the words rushing out as if he'd held them back too long. The one where I admit that I've found every possible excuse to see you because you make me feel more alive than balance sheets and investment portfolios ever could. Tessa stared at him, speechless. Flynn, I know it's sudden, he continued, and I know you might not feel the same way. You might still be planning to leave, but I needed you to know before you made any decisions. It's not sudden, Tessa said softly, turning her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. Not for me anyway. I've been fighting this feeling since you brought me lunch that first day. Flynn's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. Really, Tessa confirmed, feeling lighter than she had in months, maybe years. But Flynn, I need to know something. The rent, what about it? Have you been giving me a break because you liked me, or because you felt sorry for me? Flynn's expression grew serious. Neither. I gave your aunt a reduced rate years ago because she let me use the shop as an unofficial office when I was starting out. I kept the same rate for you because it was fair. You're a millionaire who runs an investment firm, Tessa pointed out. Fair market value would be higher. Probably, Flynn admitted, but I've never been particularly interested in extracting every possible dollar from people I care about. My parents think it's my greatest weakness as a businessman. I think it's your greatest strength as a person, Tessa said. Their dinner arrived, but neither seemed particularly interested in the food. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams, filling in the gaps in what they knew about each other. Flynn told her about the pressure of growing up in a wealthy family with high expectations. Tessa shared her struggles after losing her parents, her determination to be self-sufficient, her fear of depending on others. Is that why you haven't asked me for help with the shop? Flynn asked as they shared dessert. Because you're afraid of depending on me? Tessa considered the question. Partly because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, that I wasn't just playing store. You've more than proved that, Flynn said. The shop is thriving again. You did that, Tessa, not me, not Alina's memory. You. His faith in her was both exhilarating and terrifying. Tessa had spent so much of her life expecting things to fall apart that success felt almost more frightening than failure. As they walked back to the shop after dinner, Flynn took her hand again, his palm warm against hers in the cool evening air. Outside her door, he turned to face her, his expression both hopeful and uncertain. "I'd like to kiss you," he said simply. "If that's okay," in answer, Tessa rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Flynn's arms encircled her waist, pulling her closer. She could feel his heart beating rapidly against her chest, matching the rhythm of her own. When they finally broke apart, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you snapped at me about checking on you too much," Tessa laughed. "That's what attracted you, my irritability." "Your spirit," Flynn corrected. "Your determination, the way you care about things deeply, even when you try to pretend you don't." 3 months later, Bloom and Blossom was fully restored to its former glory. The shop windows gleamed, the displays overflowed with seasonal arrangements, and Tessa had expanded to 3 part-time employees to handle the increased business. Her graphic design background had proved useful for creating a distinctive brand identity and marketing materials that set her apart from chain competitors. Flynn had kept his word about not selling the building. In fact, he had gone further, working with the town council to establish a historical business district that would protect the character of Main Street for years to come. His parents, initially skeptical of his commitment to Meadowbrook, had come to visit and left impressed by both his business acumen and his evident happiness. On a warm summer evening, after closing the shop, Tessa found Flynn waiting for her with a picnic basket. "I thought we could have dinner in the park," he suggested. "It's a perfect night." They walked to the town square where Flynn spread a blanket beneath an old oak tree. As they ate and talked, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Tessa realized how completely her life had transformed in just a few short months. "What are you thinking about?" Flynn asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How different everything is from what I expected," Tessa admitted. "When I first came here, I thought I was just settling my aunt's affairs before moving on. I never imagined falling in love with a small-town investment banker," Flynn suggested with a smile. "Falling in love with a small town," Tessa corrected. "And yes, with you too." Flynn reached into the picnic basket and pulled out a small box. "I was going to wait for some perfect moment, but I'm realizing that with you, every moment feels right." Tessa's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a vintage ring with a delicate floral design. "Flynn, I love you, Tessa Norton," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I love your creativity, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you've brought beauty back to our town and to my life. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Tessa's eyes as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak immediately. When she finally found her voice, it was to whisper, "Yes, yes, of course I will." As Flynn slipped the ring onto her finger, Tessa couldn't help asking, "How long have you been planning this?" Flynn smiled, the expression both sheepish and tender. "Remember when I told you that Alina would let me sit in her shop when I needed to think? One of those times, years ago, she showed me a picture of her niece in Chicago. She told me you were the most talented, stubborn, big-hearted person she knew, and that someday you'd come back to Meadowbrook where you belonged." "She said that?" Tessa asked, astonished. "She did," Flynn confirmed. "And I think I started falling for you then, just from the way she described you. When you actually showed up at the shop, it was like seeing a character from a favorite story come to life." "So you've been, what, loving me from afar all this time?" Flynn laughed, pulling her close. "Not exactly. I was intrigued by the idea of you, but falling in love with the real Tessa that happened the moment you looked around that dusty old shop and saw possibility instead of ruin." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Tessa rested her head on Flynn's shoulder, the ring catching the last light of day on her finger. She had inherited a fading flower shop, not knowing that her new landlord had been waiting to love her, and not knowing that in bringing the shop back to life, she would find her own heart blossoming in ways she never could have imagined.